For me, this invokes the message that God is everywhere. That the field of energy that we've been discussing as we've been together the past few days, which very well could be another way of describing God, is everywhere. There is no time, there is no place where we are not within that field. There is no time, there is no place. We're not in the radiant experience of God. We've been discussing critical mass a little bit in our conferences and actually in some services along the way, given by David Cartier and others. And I find it to be a really important subject, this matter of critical mass. A way of thinking about critical mass, if there are any potters here, or if you know anything about throwing pots, that's how we call it, making pottery. You do it on a wheel, and now you can plug in a motor that'll turn that wheel at a particular speed, and you have a gas pedal, as it were. But there's a place not far from where I live where there are some purists potters, and they use the wheel with a big stone at the bottom of the table, and it's called a flywheel. And it takes some energy to get this wheel moving. They put their foot on it. They're sitting at their table. They have their lump of clay. And they have to start getting that stone moving in a circle. And it takes quite a bit of energy. But there's a certain point where, when they're ready to work on their clay, that wheel is turning, that flywheel is turning the potter's wheel at the right RPMs for them to do their work. And they can shift their focus from creating the energy to keep everything going into creating the pot that's on their wheel. And it takes very little energy to maintain that. A kick now, and they do some work. And a kick now, and they do some work. The worst thing you can do is allow that flywheel to slow down to the point where you have to focus so much on the flywheel and use so much energy to get the flywheel moving again. At that point, the pot tends to dry out or begins to wobble and collapse. And that's the principle of critical mass. And it's a principle of critical mass, as I think about it, as it relates to spiritual expression. Critical mass is something that, for me personally, Jane actually, I'm going to steal something from Jane that we shared this morning. And she was talking about it in a very personal way. That critical mass is when the majority of my expression, the majority of my experience, is working consciously in the creative field. I may find that I get pulled out of that for a moment. You know, I get pulled out of my centering, we might call it. I may have a slight reaction. But because the majority of who I am is maintaining the critical mass of love and of creativity in my life, it's quite easy to pull myself right back in and to allow something creative to continue in my experience. And I set for myself the goal to continue to increase that critical mass, that ratio. So if it's 40% or 50% or 60%, or I'm interested in being 100% critical mass. That I cannot be pulled off center. I cannot be distracted by anything outside of my world.